Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Today we're going to be breaking down the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. So once again, just like last week, the wild card round, we had 2 days of a 4-game slate. So you get some late swap options. You have a lot of time to kind of figure out how you can advance your lineup if you did well on the Saturday games, or figure out how you can kind of catch up and take some higher risk options. There's a video out about how to kind of think about that a little bit, strategies to games or late swapping, especially for these divisional and wildcard rounds when you have a lot more extended time rather than a few minutes. You have a ton of time. Welcome to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Sal. I'd appreciate it if you would consider subscribing, liking the video if you've seen some of my videos before. I know there's a lot more people watching than actually subscribing, so I would appreciate it if you guys can actually hit that subscribe button in the bottom right hand corner. Helps the channel out, helps a lot of things out. For those listening on the audio podcast, thank you for listening. Same thing, if you could download the audio podcast, just leave a review, lets other people know that you like it. Helps a ton. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. And then the next thing I'll just point out is we had a giveaway again, $15 PayPal, highest scoring running back, not named Zeke Elliott. Zeke ended up being the highest scoring running back, as it was basically a lock to do. Had his most career rushing yards in the first half at 91. Had an absolute berserk game, in a game where he wasn't utilized nearly as much in the second half, utilized same situation, 30 plus touches, but just didn't seem like he was ripping it off as much in that second half, but he did get in the end zone. Highest scoring running back not named Zeke was Marlon Mack, so I'm going to look through in the show notes of this, in the comments, my highlighted comment, I'll let you know who wins from there. So this next week is going to be who will be the highest scoring wide receiver on the slate going into this divisional round. So who will be the highest scoring wide receiver on the slate? You could drop that below. There's a lot more wide receivers to choose from this week. A lot more players just in general. Last week, 145 total points in the wild card round was like awful, boring games all around. Now we get a lot of fantasy goodness type games, as somebody like Peter Jennings might say. So drop that below. You have to leave your you have to be a subscriber and just like the video and leave a comment on who you think is going to be the highest scoring wide receiver to get entered into a $10 PayPal for the divisional round. But let's break it down. Let's take a first look at this divisional round. So we got a 4-game slate, 2 games on Saturday, 2 games on Sunday. Again, we got a lot better teams on the slate, and it makes sense because the teams that were on bye are now going to get to play, right? I mean, we get the Chiefs, we get the Patriots, we get the Rams, we get the Saints, and some of the teams that moved on actually have good offenses. The Chargers have a good offense, the Colts have a good offense, Dallas actually has a pretty decent offense, and Philadelphia has a good offense behind Nick Foles. All teams that are able to put up 30 points any given day. Dallas, it might be a little harder, but they still have that ability. So yeah, we got a lot of people on this slate. Starting at quarterback, Mahomes at 7K. That's where he's been all year. He's been priced in the 7K range literally the entire season based on what he's done since those first couple of games. And this is where he deserves to be, right? So Mahomes at 7K definitely makes sense. Going up against the Colts at home. Seeing how this team plays in the playoffs on a bye, I'm going to be interested. It's going to be a good game. Definitely in play here for tournaments and cash, but for right now, let's try and build something of a cash game lineup just so we know where the mindset's at. But I'm targeting these 4-game slates more so in the tournament perspective. So Drew Brees at 6,700. He's at home now against Philadelphia. Last week, if you targeted Philadelphia, you did pretty decent, right? So now you have Drew Brees at home, going to get to target Philadelphia. Perfect situation for Brees, in a situation where the second half of the year started to get a little down for him. And kind of this whole Saints offense, they started to take out Alvin Kamara, started to take out Michael Thomas. Tougher for Drew Brees. But now he's at home, week of rest, and he's playing a secondary that's just going to absolutely give it up. So perfect situation for Drew Brees at 6,700, a little cheaper than Mahomes. It's going to be interesting to see, do a lot of people go up to Drew Brees, or do they go down to who I'm seeing right here is a great play, Andrew Luck at 6,200. Always seems to be throwing multiple touchdown passes, can get you a point or two, cancel out whatever interception he might throw that day on the ground. And he's going up against the Chiefs, who, yes, at home, their defense does play a little bit better, and that's just because they get off to a faster start with their offense. So obviously teams are going to be throwing the ball, leads to more abilities if they get out to a lead to kind of pressure the quarterback, create some trouble for the quarterback. But Luck going up against them is a great matchup. He's been the comeback player of the year, in my opinion, one of the best players of the year, top 5 MVP candidate for me. That's where I want to go to start. We can highlight some other guys like Rivers. Can they finally beat Tom Brady? Can they knock him out in the playoffs in New England? Not a spot that I want to target based on what else we have in this range, just based on Tom Brady being 5,600 at home, Jared Goff being 55, Nick Foles 54, and then Dak Prescott being the least at 5,200, which Dak Prescott, he's going to face some pressure here, but not a bad situation for Dak, especially if Zeke gets a little bit halted in this. I don't mind going to Dak for $1,000 savings off of Luck, but let's build with Luck and see what we can do. I will mention Foles at 5,400. The guy just seems to get it done in the playoffs. The guy now has a good matchup against New Orleans, going on the road to the Superdome, so it is a good weather and game environment overall to stack a game like this. The Colts game is also going to be a good one to stack. Those will probably be the Colts and Chiefs, the two highest stacked games. Mainly whoever plays the Chiefs are going to be good, but the Colts also do play at a pretty high pace, so that does help, and they have a good offense. Probably adding this to the beginning as well because I usually forget. But Draft Dashboard is just a good way. It's a tool, especially for beginners. If you're a little bit more advanced, maybe you could look into some other tools, but definitely for beginners, if you want to use lineup optimizers, just using projection systems, reducing your research time, figuring out snaps, ownership, or not ownership, but snaps, routes run, targets, all these different types of things to reduce your research time. You can figure out depth charts, build lineups, put players in a player pool, which you would get access to my player pool. It's for the link below. It's a promo code. 30 days for $1. You can try out Draft Dashboard, get access to the guys that I'm using in my lineups. Let's start with Andrew Luck and see where we could build from there. So we got a ton of stud running backs on the slate, right? I mean, Melvin Gordon, Kamara, Gurley, and Elliott, these were the guys that you were building all your lineups around. Obviously, Saquon's not in there, not in the playoffs. But the regular season, these were the guys that you were trying to jam into your lineups. Zeke, his role is 30-plus touches. It seems like a game now, right? He's just getting absolute work in every single department, 30 touches. He's going to be a shoo-in for over 20. He's getting his 5-plus targets a game. It's going to be a little tougher now against this Rams front. But they do allow the pass-catching running backs to get some work. Zeke is a 3-down back. Zeke is a guy that I want to try and squeeze into this type of lineup. And he is a fade candidate in tournaments, potentially. I mean, last week, Zeke, if you want to go over to draft, if you want to go over to Fantasy Labs, Ezekiel Elliott was at 60% owned in the Millie Maker 250,000 tournament last week on DraftKings. That's a lot, right? I mean, DeAndre Hopkins was close to 60% owned as well, but Zeke was the most owned guy, as he should be, because he was the only stud running back on the slate due to Melvin Gordon having some injury issues, things like that. And he produced, right? He ended up being the highest scoring running back by a fair margin. I'm going to throw him in there again, but I do like the idea of kind of fading away from him if we have better options down below, which I think we might have a few. Todd Gurley's at 8K. Do I want to play Todd Gurley against Dallas? I sure do. Is he going to be healthy? That's going to be the main question, right? The fact that Zeke came down from 9K to 8,200 after performing well. Zeke last week, I mean, 30 points, right? 29.9 points. Still had his 5 targets. Still got his 26 attempts. Got his red zone role like he always does. And his price comes down $800. That's a savings, right? That's a pricing error in my opinion. Yes, there's other stud running backs now on the slate, so maybe you want to take some ownership off of Zeke. So you lower his price, put him in that range around Gurley, Kamara. More so Gurley at 8K. But yeah, I think this is a week that you want to play or look into fading Zeke in tournaments potentially, but in cash, as of right now on a first look, I want Zeke in there. And if we get a healthy Todd Gurley, don't like playing both running backs in the same game, but when both running backs also have a 3-down back role where they're going to be on the field 90% of the time on offense, and they have that ability to go for 30 any single week, and they also have a passing game role. Like, look, Todd Gurley, his last 3 games, averaging over around 7 to 8 targets a game, just absolutely nuts. Over 8 targets a game. He's had 25 in his last 3 that he's played in. Now that's crazy, right? So Dallas, good defense, but at home if Todd Gurley is healthy, and he went through a walkthrough, so earlier in the week it's looking good. A guy that I want to fit into a cash game lineup to get my guaranteed touches, to get my guaranteed on the field every single play is Todd Gurley. Now, another guy who kind of falls into that category, and there's 2 of them. Kamara is not a guy who's going to fall in at 7,300 for a cash game lineup. In a tournament, I think Kamara is a great play. I think he might be my play in tournaments on first look. Again, I have to go through the week because nobody's going to want to play him because of those 2 other guys above, and you probably will be able to fit him in if you jam in some cheaper wide receivers. Melvin Gordon, I don't know, right? I mean, Austin Eckler is getting snaps out there, so is Justin Jackson. He has a decent matchup against New England, but I don't know, is he going to be healthy? It seemed like he came out of that game a little injured. We're going to have to see how he was. He came out for a little while. He didn't get any of his passing game work like we're used to him getting. Maybe that's because they want to use Eckler a little bit more there so they can save Melvin Gordon's legs. If that's the case, I really don't want Gordon in cash or maybe even in tournaments. The next guy is going to be the hot take, is going to be Marlon Mack going up against the Chiefs because they're a bottom 2 DVOA against the run. And Max at 5,800, he's super cheap. He gets the majority of the work, right? I mean, Hines was only on the field for, I think, 9 snaps. Joe Wilkins, 7. Mack got all the touches out there, 24 on the ground. He's got 3 targets for the 3rd straight week, so he's getting a little bit of a receiving game floor. 5,800, this is where He's going to get a lot of ownership due to his price being cheap, due to his matchup, due to what he's done the past few weeks, and it's probably well-deserved. It's probably a sharp move. So that's a spot where you can kind of pivot off of a Zeke to a Mac, but if you're pivoting to a guy who has higher or similar ownership at a cheaper price, it might be good, but he's less reliable in terms of the overall season production, right? But you are saving over $2,000 where you can get up at another position. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Don't think we'll be able to jam him into the flex, but if possible, I'm going to try and put Mac in the flex. And then the last guy I'll touch on is Damian Williams. Absolute stud play if Spencer Ware decides to sit again or ends up having to sit. He's just a guy that in this offense, he's so versatile, whether it's in the passing game, the ground game, and he had 11 rushes. Yes, he only had 13 points in his last game, but that whole Chiefs offense was basically done in the second half. Had that game wrapped up, had the bye wrapped up, #1 seed. Williams, we'll see later in the week. He's a guy that I like a lot and a guy that I will get into a cash game lineup if it seems like he's going to be the main guy out there with no Spencer Ware. And Charkandrick West, somebody like that, they don't scare me in a game that matters in the playoffs. They just signed Williams to a 2-year deal. He's going to be the guy seeing the work. Outside of that, C.J. Anderson, nothing if Todd Gurley plays at all. Todd Gurley is a 3-down back. James White's going to be the guy that gets overlooked, I believe. Last game of the year, he got in the end, or he got a pretty good game, got in the end zone his last 2 games, got in the end zone in the receiving department for the first time in about like 3 months or 2.5 months. So that was good to see. I think that this is a situation where we can see a couple of passing plays to a James White, but there's just so many running backs in that backfield. I mean, we could talk about the other ones. We could talk about on first look Sony Michel against the Chargers. Don't like that at all. Could be a totally great pivot play, but no passing game work. I don't want to risk it there. And then below there is just the backups. I mean, Eckler's a decent play if you do believe that Gordon is still even worse banged up since he came out of that last game. They don't want to use him in the passing game at all. Then you're basically shooing in Eckler for maybe 5-6 targets, which isn't terrible at his price point of $4,500. But for me, I'm paying up at stud in cash games and probably also in tournaments. If you can fit these 3 guys somehow, and we might be able to, and if anything, we can come down at quarterback perhaps, because last week, like the 3 most expensive quarterbacks, all the quarterbacks basically scored around the same amount. I mean, Nick Foles was super cheap. He scored 16. We had Dak last week was super cheap. He ended up scoring 20, one of the most points on the slate. Russell Wilson was cheaper. The guys that were the most amount of money last week, I mean, they did decent, right? That Deshaun Watson, I think, had like 20. Andrew Luck had 18. But you're spending an extra $1,000 for not a lot of point differential, and that's what you're going to get at QB, right? I mean, Patrick Mahomes is probably the exception for a guy who can give you a 10-point difference basically every single week, and you can count on it. Other than that, any quarterback can kind of put up 20 to 25 points, and we saw that last week. So, although I am on Luck because I like the game situation, I'm fine coming off of him if it allows us to get to better wide receivers. So let's get to there now. What wide receiver? So Philadelphia, a spot that you want to target wide receivers against, right? So one thing I do want to look at is just Nick Foles' price again. So 5,400. Yeah. So you want to target the Philadelphia. Anybody playing Philadelphia in the secondary? Allen Robinson had one of his best games of his career. Had 10 catches, 130 plus yards, a touchdown. He just looked absolutely unstoppable out there. And he's a guy that gets moved around. Allen Robinson's on the outside, but he gets moved into the slot. Michael Thomas is primarily a slot-type guy, so he's still going to have a good matchup wherever he is, but he's $7,900. If this is the lineup that we want to go with, it's going to be tough to get there, but he's an absolute smash play, right? I mean, the last time he played, he had 4 catches, 4 targets, 92 yards, and a touchdown. Teams have been able to scheme out Michael Thomas and Kamara, which is actually pretty scary. But the way you attack Philadelphia is through the air. And in that game, they kind of blew out Philadelphia, right? 48-7. There was no need for him to get any more work, really. That's a game where we saw a Mark Ingram and a Kamara combo deal. And that could be another sneaky play, a Mark Ingram and a Kamara combo deal if you want at running back. It's just not a play that I'm willing to play. Tyreek Hill, absolute boomer bust guy. He boomed once again, which he's done probably about a third of the year. 30-plus points, got in the end zone in multiple different ways, 100-yard game. And he could very well do that at home against Indianapolis. Primetime game, the guy likes to show out. Any playoff game's a primetime game. Definitely a good play for tournaments. Not a guy in my cash game that I'll probably ever touch just because the guy's floor could literally be 2 points, right? He could literally not do anything if he doesn't catch a deep bomb like he did last week. I mean, last week he caught, an 80-yard, 67-yard touchdown. Without that, he's barely got you 30 yards, right? So definitely something I will look at in tournaments, but probably not end up getting there a lot. just because of the price point, because of what else is there at running back, and we have a lot better value, I think, a little bit below at wide receivers. You have T.Y. Hilton at 6,700 against the Chiefs. If you want to pair Andrew Luck with somebody, this is a great guy to pair him with. T.Y. still getting the majority of the targets out there, getting 10. He ran 35 routes this past game against Houston, but somebody else who I'll just jump down to, and he's going to start to get way more popular. Dontrell Inman, he also ran 35 routes. So he ran the same amount of routes as T.Y. Hilton. He only saw 4 targets, but he got in the red zone, got in the end zone. That's 3 straight weeks. Not something that's going to stay, right? It's going to definitely come down to the mean. But if we head over here to Fantasy Labs and we see Dontrell Inman was only 14.8% owned last week in the Millie Maker, that's definitely going to come up based on the fact that he's still cheap. He's below 5K, 4,800, and based on the fact that he's got a good matchup, been in the end zone, people are going to see his game log, see that he scores touchdowns. So maybe in tournaments, a spot to pivot away from if he's going to be 25+% owned. But right now, if we're going to be starting this lineup out with Andrew Luck and we need some value at wide receiver, I'm going to put Inman in there with Andrew Luck, get these 2 stud running backs, and also Marlon Mack. And if this is a lineup that we can kind of finish off and feel confident about, and I like Inman, right? He's running the same amount of routes as T.Y. Hilton, has a good matchup, has a great quarterback. That's another thing that I like to kind of decide on some of my cheaper value plays, which Inman's in that lower mid range. It's just who's the quarterback throwing the ball, right? Like last week, Lamar Jackson, I didn't play any Michael Crabtree because for me it was Hines or Crabtree, and if I made that pivot, I would have won a lot of money, high 5 figures, but I'm not going to make that pivot because I didn't trust Lamar Jackson to throw 2 touchdowns to Michael Crabtree because he hasn't done it all year. He's barely thrown 2 all year, right? And I like Nyheim Hines because I like this quarterback a little bit better in his game situation, things like that. So I allow the pass catcher's quarterback to kind of dictate a little bit if it's a close call. So Hilton, I mean, you're getting a $3,000 or $2,000 savings if you go to Inman. Yes, Hilton's the bigger tournament guy. He can get you a bunch of boom or bust and somebody to look into. But for this first look, Inman's the guy for me. Cooper at 6,500 had another great game. Over 100 yards, didn't find the end zone, but still got you over 20 points. And on short slates, if you can get anybody to score 20 points, you're probably going to cash in that lineup if you could do it a few times. I think he's also in a great spot again now. A little tougher cornerback matchups with Talib back there, but Peters is still just a trash can this year. Improved a little bit second half of the year. But Cooper can have his way. Depending on how the Rams take scheme, they're going to either scheme probably to try and limit Zeke, which would be the smart thing to do, or limit Cooper. So one of them is going to eat. I'm going to side with Zeke, and a lot of the times both of them can eat, right? Like last week, they both had great games. They've done that like 4 times in the short 8-game sample that they've had together. So a Dallas stack is also in play if we can get up to there. You save 1,000 by going to Dak. Dallas stack seemed to work out last week. They did. And you got 3 guys combined you in a wild card round for 70 points over 70 points between the quarterback Dak getting 20, Amari getting 20, Zeke getting 30. You can kind of rely on that because that's where the ball is going in that offense, especially now Cole Beasley uncertain, wasn't garnering a lot of targets, maybe 5-6 out there, but that still looks that are going to go other places, and we could talk about that. Keenan Allen against New England, if he's going to be in the slot, he definitely gets to avoid Gilmore, so a little bit of a better matchup. Might have to face, McCourty out there, whatever it is in the slot, so not sure I want to go Keenan Allen, but I do think that he is a situation in tournaments to get a ton of leverage on. People are going to see his game logs. People are going to see that price range that he's in right next to Amari Cooper and T.Y., and they're just going to avoid him. Could be a very cool leverage play, very good leverage play. Julian Edelman, I'll gloss over. He's really the only wide receiver out there now that Josh Gordon's gone. Literally the only one. Chris Hogan runs a lot of routes, but he doesn't do anything. It's basically Julian Edelman, a little bit of Gronk, and then the running back sprinkled in. James White catching some balls, whoever it might be. Burkhead. But he's been very consistent, right? He's been getting in the end zone. He's been seeing the most targets. He's been seeing a ridiculous amount of red zone targets. I think he's got like 12 or 13 red zone targets. And remember, this guy missed the first 4 weeks of the season. It's the playoffs now. Brady trusts basically Edelman and maybe Gronk a little bit. Other than that, James White possibly, but that's not a wide receiver. Edelman's going to get a lot of targets, right? He's probably going to see 7 to 10 targets in this game. But he's going to be facing PFF's #1 cornerback in Desmond King. So for cash games at 6,300, going to be an avoid for me. Guy that I like a lot, Robert Woods at 5,900. If this is a guy we can fit in, I'm going to target it all day long. His last game watchers are going to see he scored 4.5 points. They're going to avoid him at 5,900. He's a discount, right? This guy's been in the 6,900s. He's been $1,000 more, at least $500 more all season long. He's been Mr. Consistent all season long, getting 70-plus yards basically every single week except last week. People are going to jump off him. I'm going to buy low. He'll be in the slot. He'll get to avoid at home also. He'll be in the slot, get to avoid a guy like Byron Jones on the outside. Give me Robert Woods, and let's see if we can make this lineup work by going really cheap at defense. 3,700 spend left. It's going to be tough. We'll probably have to come down at quarterback, but let's just see. I like Robert Woods there, though. I also like Jeffrey against New Orleans. Jeffrey, though, a guy who can't really do anything after the catch, like at all. His game logs from this past game aren't up, but he did have a decent game, caught a couple of balls, got good yardage, didn't get in the end zone, though. That was Golden Tate's role. Well, I was on Golden Tate, so I'm happy that that happened. Other than that, I mean, we're floating down here, 4,700 from Mike Williams, big boomer bust guy. Definitely a good value play at 4,700, I would imagine, in terms of tournaments, but not in terms of cash, just due to not getting a ton of targets, right? It's basically, does he catch a touchdown in that game? Golden Tate is now 4,600, so this is interesting. Nelson Aguilar now drops below Golden Tate, which last week Aguilar was $600 more. Now he's $300 less. He's $4,300 here, and he still got his 6 targets, which he's been getting. Golden Tate, though, did find the end zone, but it leads me to wonder, they both had the same amount of targets, and Aguilar was still on the field a little bit more. Yes, Tate kind of knew the Bears, so that's why I was on him a little bit for that kind of story of playing them twice a year, knows them a little bit better. The defenders in the slot, which their guy was out. So, yeah, 4,500, he's a little bit more now, or 4,600, he's a little bit more now than Aguilar. I'm kind of fine going down to Aguilar. Tate's logs also are not up right now. But I'm fine in this situation going down to Aguilar and kind of buying low on him. But the guy that I want to go down to is Torrey Smith. So I want to get a guy on New Orleans with Drew Brees throwing the ball at home in a dome, coming off a bye, trying to get to the NFC Championship, facing this Eagles defense that just got ripped apart by Allen Robinson. In pretty much, Mitch Trubisky did pretty well as well, right? 20 fantasy points. I don't want Michael Thomas. I do want him, but I just don't want to go up and pay for that price. So Torrey Smith's a guy that I'm going to kind of plug in there, right? Traquan Smith can be a guy who blows up, and then it can just be I'm on the wrong side of that. But Smith in his first game back, well, actually, I put in Traquan Smith, but I don't want him. I don't want Traquan. I want the other T. Smith that's in here. Who am I missing? Not Torrey Smith. I'm saying the wrong name. I want my guy. He's right here somewhere. Ted Ginn. Yeah, so Ted Ginn. So Ted Ginn's $200 more than Traquan Smith, and I think that's deserving. Ginn in his first game back caught 5 balls on 8 targets, 74 yards. Got good chemistry right away. Now he gets a great matchup, a matchup in which he'll probably be on the outside a little bit, but I'll take that. Allen Robinson did a lot of damage on the outside, and at 4,400, definitely a spot I want to go. So now we've had our wide receivers filled out: Inman, Woods, Ginn. I like that a lot. We have to fill a tight end and a defense with 3,350 left. Just to kind of round up wide receiver. Cooks, I'm just personally choosing Woods over him. Cooks is in the same type of position. He's just going to probably have to face Byron Jones. I like Woods in the slot a little bit more. Gallup at $4,000. So this is the thing that I like to talk about. So Cole Beasley is going to be uncertain right now. Gallup, a lot of people are going to gravitate towards him. He got in the end zone. Cole Beasley's out. More targets for Gallup. And that very well could be the case. But the places I like to look are who are the guys that are going to fill in now for Cole Beasley, because they're going to see an upgrade, right? So a guy who might fill in there, possibly a Tavon Austin. Will Tavon Austin see more snaps in the slot? It's basically Tavon Austin or Noah Brown, right? Noah Brown got a good amount of work. I want to see how many snaps that he had in that game. He had 4 targets, 1 catch. So this is something to watch because these guys are at minimum price, right? So if Cole Beasley's out and Cole Beasley was garnering, I don't know, per game, around 5 targets a game, which is a good amount if you can get a guy at 3K getting you 5 targets. He catches 3 balls for 50 yards, something like that, falls his way into the end zone, whatever it might be, 3 balls for 30 yards, that's 6 points at 3K. It's a spot that's going to open up salary on your roster and other places. So make sure to keep up with that. Don't fall for the bait. It could be a good option to go to Michael Gallup only at $4,000. He'll probably end up seeing maybe 1 more target. But try and go to the guys who are going to see 5 more targets because Beasley out, which could be potentially Austin in the slot, maybe Noah Brown, who saw a decent amount of work in the slot. Noah Brown kind of looks like a tight end, so I don't know if they'll be in the slot a lot, but we'll see. These are definitely guys that can fill in decently. We'll hop over to defense quick and literally just put one in that's cheap. I'm going to go with, so trying to maybe get correlation with one of our guys here. Let's just go with the Cowboys. I'm really not looking into it too much. You go with the Cowboys now at tight end, you have $4,500 to spend. Not a ton of money, right? And actually, if we do go down a little bit more to the Colts against KC, that's rough. The Eagles against New Orleans, that's rough. But if you go all the way down to the Eagles, just for the sake of the first look, tight ends, Kelsey at 7K, smash play. Like if you can get Kelsey in some of your lineups, it's great. A Mahomes, Kelsey stack in cash is probably pretty solid as well. It just limits you in terms of what you can do elsewhere in your lineup, especially getting up at these bigger running backs. Ertz at 5,700 against New Orleans. I think he's in a good spot. New Orleans is pretty decent against the tight end. The last time that Ertz actually played New Orleans, his game log was 2 catches, 3 targets, 15 yards. The whole team sucked then. People are going to see that they're going to avoid him. I think he'll be a good play. Ebron, going to be a smash play. Man just keeps catching touchdowns. Really good position for Ebron. In terms of the money that we have left, I like Ebron a lot against the Chiefs. So preferably I would go to Ebron. But at 5,500, can't afford him. 4,600, we have 4,700 left. I'll slide in Gronk right now. Jarwin was the guy I said to stay off of because Zeke wasn't playing. That was a totally wacky game, week 17. Then Jarwin came right back down to earth, 3 catches, 3 targets, 15 yards. I'll put Gronk in here. He's one of the 2 guys I think that Brady is the only really guys that he trusts on that offense outside of Edelman in the receiving game down the field. So I'll put Gronk in here against the Chargers. Might have a tough matchup, but in terms of what else that we have to work with at tight end, I'd rather have Gronk over a guy like Jarwin, Antonio Gates, things like that, at least in cash. If we're talking tournaments, I might leave a little money on the table and go down to a Jarwin or adjust my flex, things like that. So this is the first look lineup. I mean, we got Andrew Luck at quarterback. We got Ezekiel Elliott and Gurley jamming them in there at running back. Inman, who's running the same amount of routes as a guy like T.Y. Hilton, getting in the end zone, seeing red zone looks in Indianapolis. We got Robert Woods, who I love in the slot, avoiding Byron Jones. He's at home where Jared Goff plays a little bit better, and he looked his way a lot in the slot, 70 yards in basically every game except last week. I'm happy if people want to jump off of him, and I'm happy to buy low on his price. Ted Ginn Jr., after his first game back, maybe I'm being a little bit of a game log watcher, but I mean production, right? 5 catches on 8 targets, first game back of injury, and now he's got an ideal matchup against the Eagles. Give me him and Drew Brees at home all day. His guy throwing him the ball. Gronk, 4,600, kind of just a spot at tight end that's been a wasteland. If you can't get up to those elite guys, Kelsey, Ebron, Ertz, who have been the 3 best guys on the year, I'm going to try and find a way to maybe get up to them at the end of the week. But as of right now, I'll put Gronk in there if it allows us to get to Marlon Mack, who's going up against the Chiefs, a bottom DVOA defense, who's seeing a ton of the work, getting a little bit of a passing game floor, and he's too cheap at 5,800. And then just let me slide in whatever defense works. In this instance, it's either the Colts against the Chiefs or the Eagles against New Orleans. That's going to change as the week goes on. This is just a first look lineup. This whole thing's going to change as the week goes on, guys. Thank you so much. If you're still watching, please hit that subscribe button. Please comment below who you think is going to be the highest scoring wide receiver. Also, check out Draft Dashboard if you're still watching. I'm going to be probably adding this to the beginning as well because I usually forget. But Draft Dashboard is just a good way. It's a tool, especially for beginners. If you're a little bit more advanced, maybe you could look into some other tools. But definitely for beginners, if you want to use lineup optimizers, just using projection systems, reducing your research time, figuring out snaps, ownership, or not ownership, but snaps, routes run, targets, all these different types of things to reduce your research time. You can figure out depth charts, build lineups, put players in a player pool, which you would get access to my player pool. It's for the link below. It's a promo code. 30 days for $1. You can try out Draft Dashboard, get access to the guys that I'm using in my lineups. Yeah, so check it out, definitely. Also, be sure to check out the blog or the audio version of this if you're watching this. If you're listening on the audio, what's up, gang? But for for you guys watching this video, check out the audio version if it's something that's easier for you guys going to work, in the car, whatever it might be. Appreciate it if you guys can also check that out. And yeah, look down in the description below for anything else that's cool to you guys. Definitely the blog, check that out. There's a GoFundMe down there. I'm trying to buy a new laptop so I can get more content out for you guys. I just can't stream right now, and that's what I want to be doing. I want to be going live with you guys. So yeah, that's where I'm at right now. This is my first look lineup. It's early in the week. We'll be back later on, and I'll probably break down each of the Saturday and Sunday slates as well. So best of luck, guys. Peace.